Five, four, three, two, one. Thunderbirds are go. Hey guys, it's Paul from the Ops team. So one of the things we like to do on the Funcast is unpack important terms from our industry. Terms like LOI, commercial diligence, restructuring, agile methodology, the value creation plan, and lots of others. But there's one term that we haven't hit on yet, and that term is product market fit. Now, the term product market fit first appeared in a Mark Andreessen blog post from 2007. And yes, I am talking about that Mark Andreessen, founder of Netscape, and now most known for starting the VC fund that bears his name, Andreessen Horowitz. Now, the blog post is titled "The Only Thing That Matters," and it's all about the crucial moment when a startup has identified a strong pocket of demand in a market and created a product that satisfies that demand. And he argued that achieving product market fit is the most important goal for any startup because it signals that the company is on the right path to success and can start to double down in the areas where building, selling, and scaling feel just a little easier. So Mark's a venture capitalist, which means he invests in a lot of companies that are in their figure it out stage of their life cycle. They think they got a great idea, but that may be a few pivots away from really solidifying how they make money, who their customers are, and what their business truly focuses on. And in case you're just getting to know us here at ParkerGale, or just as a reminder, we are not venture capitalists. We are buyout people. And we like to buy companies that have been around for a while, companies that have a couple hundred happy customers, a stable foundation, but still a few things to do before they can truly say they've finished the work that the founder started. So what does product market fit have to do with our world of more established but still emerging software companies? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today in a conversation that features an expert on the topic of product market fit. Rob Snyder is our guest on today's episode. Now, Rob, like me, is a recovering consultant, but since he left McKinsey & Company, he's been a multi-time startup founder and currently advises technology companies on how to shorten their search for product market fit as part of his work at Reforge and as a fellow at Harvard Innovation Labs. He's also published one of the most compelling pieces of content I've ever read on this topic. His 0 to 1 Path to Product Market Fit workshop deck, which seems like it's all over the internet these days, and which we'll be flipping through as part of today's conversation, is a must-read on this concept. So just a quick note on today's episode. We're releasing this as both an audio podcast and a video podcast on YouTube. And since we do pull up some of Rob's frameworks on product market fit as part of the episode, I definitely recommend watching this one instead of listening to it. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and click subscribe over on the ParkerGale Capital YouTube channel. We'll be releasing lots more video content this year, and we would love to hear what you think. Summing all that up, if you've ever wondered what it feels like for a founder as they get a sense of where to focus, how PE investors think about assessing product market fit, or if you just want some practical points for how to better position your product so the people in your target market get it, love it, and buy it, I think you'll enjoy today's episode with my guest, Rob Snyder. Let's go. So Rob, I'm going to give you a chance to formally introduce yourself in a few minutes, but let's hit the topic first. What is product market fit and why does it matter if you're an emerging tech company?
Product market fit is just like, have you built something people actually want? And so if you haven't done that, then you're just LARPing around doing fancy company things that like business people in theory do. And you haven't built something people actually want. So nobody's actually paying you money, or, you feel like you have to twist arms to get any deals done, get any customers across the line. And so, product market fit is just like the whole point of building a software company. You're trying to build a product that the market actually wants to buy versus that of like a fancy little science project.
Yeah, and good things happen once you get there, right? And I think that's part of the reason this concept is so interesting. I think it's part of the reason your body of work is having a moment, which we'll talk about in a second. But part of the reason this concept is near and dear to my heart is it's an important thing to find on your journey to grow your business faster, build something that's enduring. But damn, there's so much conflicting opinions and advice and frameworks and pointers and best practices related to those three words of product market fit. And I know you agree with that, but like, if you're a CEO or you're a founder, talk about what that feels like. Cause you've also been in
Mhm.
that chair. Like you have 50 different voices in your head telling you what you should be doing and how to find this mythical PMF thing. Like what is that like and what's the problem with that?
Yeah. So there are no shortage of opinions of like how to find product market fit and what it is. And so my background is basically like I read all the books, went to McKinsey, went to HBS, like thought I knew what I was doing, and then got rocked, got punched in the face repeatedly when trying to find product market fit. And I think a lot of it was because I had all of these complicated theories and frameworks and processes in my head. And like, turns out a lot simpler than we think it is. It's a lot simpler and like a lot dumber than we think it is in terms of like what it is, how to think about it, and like how to get there. It's not easy, obviously, like nothing's easy. But yeah, like you're told that you have to follow some kind of like scientific experimentation process, and you have to go and fill out a shit ton of whiteboards and do vision exercise and ayahuasca retreat and like then run experiments and force rank pain points and all this nonsense. And you wind up doing that. I did that for like 2 years. And at the end of that, you're like, okay, I have done all of the work. I should have product market fit now. And then you go to sell and like the market tells you it doesn't care. It doesn't care at all. You are so far off. You have no idea what you're doing. And so, yeah, so you feel like a total idiot at that point. And then like, I think that's the process that every single B2B startup goes through, every single B2B founder goes through. And it could be 6 months, could be 2 years. I've heard as long as 5. And that's a lot of fun to reach that moment where you're like, okay, I've done all the complicated things. I've done all the market research and all the analysis, and no one cares.
Yeah. And what was the business that you built? Because that's an important point. Like you're not just, we're both recovering consultants, which I think is one of the reasons that we're friends. Like we're having to both draw on what we've done in our past, but also unlearn some of the things that we've done in our past. So you went from McKinsey to the startup world, got punched in the face, like you said. Like what was the startup where you started to, unlearn some of these fancy consulting frameworks?
Yeah. So it started as essentially like an employee on demand scheduling tool.
Yep.
For hourly workplaces, and spent 2 years trying to make that work. And just if you squinted, it like kind of maybe worked and kind of maybe had some revenue, but wasn't real. And then basically after a bunch of pain, we just had one customer call us up at one point and like, hey, listen, I really don't need what you're doing. Could you just help me recruit employees? And if you could do that, I will pay you. All right, cool. I guess we're trying that now. And so it kind of shifted into employee recruitment and retention for initially hourly workspaces, eventually restaurants, like quick service restaurants.
Which is also a sneak preview of something we're going to talk about in approximately 19 minutes, which
Oh boy.
is this demand thing. Paying
Yeah.
attention to this demand thing seems kind of important to the product market fit framework. So remember that we talked about that. But like for you, one of the words that comes to mind is generous, because you've written down what it is that you've figured out, and it seems to be helping a lot of people. And I feel like on Twitter, your goal is to never become the main character on Twitter, but on LinkedIn, like it's a little bit the opposite. Like you're trying to share helpful stuff and put frameworks out there and get noticed. And you seem to have beaten the video game this quarter. So one of the reasons that I reached out initially and we've started talking is this 0 to 1 path to product market fit workshop that you put out there that you've been sharing and kind of basing your business on. And I've got the post up here, bad lighting, but trust me, it's on LinkedIn. And I just want to read some stats off to you. 4,566 likes, 5,314 comments, 245 people have said, yeah, this makes sense and reposted it. and just a lot of great chatter and pickup on LinkedIn. So like you're clearly onto something. And I want to spend most of the conversation talking about what's in that deck, how emerging tech businesses can use it, and most importantly, like what we all seem to be getting wrong
Mhm.
about product market fit, right? So this is video. We're, in the modern age using YouTube. And one of the concepts in this document that stood out to me is this idea of the pain cave,
Eh,
right? And you just kind of talked about it a little bit, but the promise in this document, which we'll link to in the show notes and make sure everybody can get to, is we can help you avoid the 12 to 24 months in the pain cave that you seemingly unnecessarily suffered through, right? So, like, that's one of the big topics in this document is this idea of like the pain cave. I love the copy around like wasting your life and the practical approach to product market fit. So talk to us about that. Like what causes the pain cave? What does that feel like? And like how can you start to avoid some of those traps?
yeah. Yeah. So the pain cave is basically you enter the pain cave the moment you realize that all of the work and research and analysis and experiments you've done up until this point were like a waste of time. And you
Yeah.
have no idea what the business actually should be. And so that hits at different points for different startups. For me, it was like a gradual realization over 2 years, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And so the experience is that like you feel really smart when you start a business. You feel like, yeah, I've done the research. I'm swinging. I'm going to hit a home run here, like exit in 4 years, maybe even IPO. We'll just, I'll just bottle the champagne right now.
Yep.
And then, and then you have a plan of attack, and then you try to bring your product to market, and market doesn't care, and you don't know why.
Yep.
And at that point, you have a million different voices in your head, a bunch of people shouting on social media, a bunch of different books you've read, all telling you a million things to do that individually sound right, but are like, you can't do all of them, and most of them don't make sense to do together. And so it's kind of like stuck in this moment of having no clue what to do, what exactly to do, what exactly matters. Because a million things sound right. And you just kind of like break down in that moment and just like look in the mirror like I hate myself in this very moment. And so that's when you're in the pain cave, when it's totally unclear, when your plan A hasn't worked and you have no idea what the shape of a plan B could possibly be. And there are a million different options. And yeah, basically my sense is that working with a bunch of startups and being a founder now multiple times, the path to product market fit is basically you come up with a good idea, then you enter the pain cave for some amount of time. And then if you're lucky, something miraculously gets figured out. And then you have a business, and then you go and try to scale that business and you pretend like that was the plan all along.
And in a way, I mean, framing it up that way, the goal is not to maybe avoid the pain cave of building things that people don't want, feeling that level of overwhelm and like the humbling that happens with that, but it's to like shorten that cycle, right?
Yeah.
And so like I think you described this really well on this page in the deck. Like why does the pain cave happen? Well, like we've all had some of this experience where either you get really excited about a new product launch and you build something that people don't actually want, despite doing all the quote unquote smart work that you just mentioned. Um, like there's all these startup or tech business terms that you have to like define or clarify or get people aligned behind. And there's actually infinite number of these, right? And you can't get all of them right, but you spend a lot of time like deciding what are these things for your business. And then like as a result, And I think this is where the demand thing comes in. Like you end up working on things that don't really matter, and you kind of start hallucinating and lose sight of the fact that all this work is designed to go get and keep customers,
Yes.
and not like define and clarify and, finish the Mad Lib of startup development that this appears to be, because it's not paint by numbers. And I think part of the reason that people get stuck here is they take this paint by numbers approach instead of going and finding people that want your thing. Does that jive with your philosophy, or how would you, I don't know, make that better or call bullshit on it?
No, I think that's largely right. Like my view of all of this is that basically you sell, you try to deliver, and you learn in that process. And that's it. That's how you find product market fit. And there's a few nuances in there for, like, I think, use a case study, understand demand versus supply. But the core of this is sell, serve, learn, and get better. And all of the kind of fancy words that we use, all of the 57-step entrepreneurship playbooks that people put out there, like, those are all getting in the way of just doing the core thing. And it's like, yeah, you're going to be in the pain cave. When you try to sell, serve, and learn, the first 5 sales calls you have are going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be in the pain cave then, but you're going to more quickly move your way out of the pain cave because you have calls 6 through 10 scheduled next week. And you're going to try something a little bit different then, instead of spending like 2 years just building something nobody wants.
Yep. Amen. I have this concept that I talk about, discovered, not decided. And I think it directly overlaps with your stuff. All this checklist, startup best practices, frameworks, it's meant to help you decide instead of discover what customers actually want. You have to decide your mission, your vision, your values. You have to decide your ICP. You have to decide your personas. You have to decide, like, you need knowledge of all that stuff, but it's all in service of that moment when you get in front of a customer and you've tapped into demand, right? Like, so the real test here is not finishing the paint by numbers work that goes into a startup. It's finding demand and excavating demand from another person. You have this great page in the deck where you talk about, has this quote ever been said? Today is the day I get to buy new enterprise software, and the exclamation point is there both intentionally and sarcastically. Or he was like, wow, this value prop is so good. Wow, that they know my pain points. So just talk about this, because we're all kind of fooling ourselves when we think that people will get viscerally excited about these decisions that we're making, or these messages that we're creating, or even the product that we're building. And it feels like the moment you get comfortable with that is the moment you get to evolve a little bit.
So I just don't think we have good ways to think about what do people actually want. And that's pretty important if the whole point of product market fit is building something that people want. And so we think people want, some cool new software. We think they want something with a really compelling ROI story and value prop. We think they want us to probe their pain points and problems. Like, no, that none of that makes sense when you like double click into it, right? Like, again, for these reasons, nobody actually has ever woken up and said, yeah, today's the day I get to buy enterprise software. That would be a crazy thing for anybody to say. And I can pretty much guarantee that will never be said ever, seriously.
Yeah.
But then when you get there, you have to ask yourself, okay, what's some sort of like a foundational model for understanding what people want? Like, what is demand? And that's where you go down a very interesting rabbit hole, where basically you got to split out 2 things. You have to split out demand and supply. And so, what is demand? Demand is something that somebody is trying to accomplish. Like, I visualize demand in my mind as if I could see it into your Asana board, your project management software, or your to-do list. And your to-do list, your project management software was like totally up to date and accurately reflected what was on your mind. And what I care about is not like, what are the million projects in backlog that you might eventually want to get to? What I really care about is what is on your critical path? What is the number one to do that you're focused on? And
Yeah.
what causes you to move that onto your critical path?
Yeah, like the catalyst or the like when we put ourselves in the story, we call it a buying trigger because we think that when that thing clicks into first place, then they get excited, but they still don't. Like it's really about the catalyst or the change inside the company that says, okay, the thing that is most important to me, again, stay out of the frame, software companies. The thing that is most important to me just changed, and now it's this. And now I start to spend more of my time thinking about the way that I finish that job to bring jobs to be done theory into
Yep.
this. And there's a lot of ways to do that job, and a lot of them don't involve you. But to your point, it's about understanding like, okay, I love the Trello board analogy. Like, what else is on that board? And what are the seasons in which the different things move it into first place on the priorities? And what I've found as someone who works with a lot of sales and marketing teams is when you understand that, like, and even if you don't know the product any better, you immediately become more dangerous when you're talking to customers. And like, people put up with you more because you understand just what they're doing, not their pain points, not their hopes and dreams, not their competitive alternatives, but like I call it the cocktail party test. Like you can show up and get stuck in the corner at a cocktail party with somebody and survive for a half an hour and have an interesting conversation because you know what's on that list and you know what causes those things to move around.
Yeah, I think the other point there too is like there's a lot of talk about pain points and problems. And I don't really care that much about those. Those might be triggers for something to move onto your priority list.
Yeah.
But like life is a series of pain points that I like mostly do nothing about. And so, and like I have a million problems and I'm not going to take action on any of them. So
Yeah.
so what really matters is the action piece. And when we orient ourselves towards what are you actually prioritizing? What do you actually want to accomplish? What's job to be done, right? Like if we're going to get like esoteric about it, but like what's the project on your Trello board? If I understand that, then my product, my offering, like how I help you accomplish that project comes fairly intuitive. So the
Yeah.
whole game of finding product market fit has to start with this demand side. Because if you start on the supply side with like, what's the product I want to build and try to connect that to some sort of demand, right? Like that's just that's like reversing causality.
Yeah. So that gets right into like tops down versus bottoms up approach. Like there is the word that comes to mind when I see this page with demand on the left-hand side and supply on the right-hand side is like mindset. Like if you have a demand-oriented mindset, you're going to concentrate on the things on the left-hand side of the page. If you have a supply mindset, you're going to focus on like building the coolest thing that you think is going to make the connection later on. But it's about the thing. It's not about the customer. It's about the thing. And like the hard part about technology is I think the gravitational pull towards the supply side is way higher for us in technology because we got into this business because we like the magic of creating the machine that solves the problem automatically without a human in the middle. And like left to our own devices, we like to incrementally tune that machine and like add the next node and add the next module and like build the robot that's really cool to look at instead of the way less sexy, but way more useful exercise of, no, I'm just going to go talk to 5 more customers and get even sharper on what's on their board, how that's changing, and what are the catalysts that, change that over time. So let's talk about tops down versus bottoms up. Cause I feel like that's a pretty important concept. And like, in a way, it's sort of the crux of what it is that you teach people.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is again like the uh, Rob shouts at convoluted theories and tries to make them simple.
Yeah.
And so when you think about product market fit as this like super ambiguous concept, there are so many different theories that you can have around it. And what I've found is that you just have to make it concrete and focus on literally one customer's story. And so if you can come bottoms up from one customer's story, which is why did that customer need to change? What was the shape of the change they wanted? What options did they consider? How did we fit in as the best option in their situation? And like, what did we literally provide them? Like that's essentially the like minimum atomic unit of product market. And so if we look at it from that bottoms up thing of just one customer at a time and say, okay, we have to just figure out one case study and repeat that. Then it goes from this like super complex 190 IQ nonsense to something that is deeply practical of like, I just have to find one case study, repeat that case study, and make it better. And that's the job.
Okay. So I buy the demand versus supply thing. And I think that leads us directly into this idea of top down versus bottom up and like how you organize this search. And the concept that stood out to me more than any other from your body of work and your approach to product market fit is this idea of looking for the case study. And it feels like the atomic unit of product market fit for you is the case study. And that's kind of the unlock. Like if there's a tuning fork moment where you can figure out like, okay, let's just go find more of those and build a product that increases our probability of finding more of those. It all starts with this. So talk about the importance of the case study and talk about like the mechanics of how you find one, build one, use one.
Yeah. So the case study is, I think, the core unit of a business. We often think that what a business does is it does like two separate things. It builds product and it sells product. There's a lot of talk about that. And those two things are like technically right, but all of that is in service of repeating a case study. And so the core atomic unit of a business is a case study. And when we think about a case study, you just imagine something that's on somebody's website, right? And it's like, here's what they were trying to accomplish. Here's the options they considered. Here's why they chose us versus all their other options. Here's what we did and here's what the results were. It's like that simple. Those are the elements of it. But when you pick those pieces apart, you'll realize that actually that covers demand and supply really, really well.
Yeah.
Because if you start the case study with, here's why they woke up one morning and said, fuck it, today's the day we have to do something about XYZ, right? That's actually demand. And what did they want to accomplish? And then how do we fit into that? Explains how supply meets demand. And so one customer case study is actually the encapsulation of your whole business. And so focusing at that level for the case study and just saying, okay, we want to articulate the case study, which puts all of our product and our features into context, into the customer's context, and saying, okay, that's the case study we can uniquely deliver versus alternatives. Awesome. We know what to build. We know who we serve. We know who our target market is. We know all of these things because we just like put together this case study, say, yeah, this is the case study. And then sales is literally taking this case study and showing it to people who look like they should want this case study and saying, do you want this case study or not? And if they pull, then cool, they also have demand and you repeat the case study. Yeah, if they don't for some reason, then you've learned something about the shape of demand and the shape of your market. And you can iterate on your case study from there, or you can just iterate on your ICP from there.
Yeah. So there's two really important and kind of exciting nuggets in what you just said. And for me, like as an operating partner, I feel like some of the value that I bring to my companies is finding little ways to snap them out of like a product out mindset.
Yes.
Like we have the product, it makes sense to add this little appendage to the product How are we going to add that appendage? What is the architecture to add that appendage? What is the roadmap? What is the time? Like it's we're like a golfer looking at the putt with our eyes around the brim of our hat, just trying to block everything out, including our customers. And the power of the case study is it takes the camera that you're using and it puts the customer back in the center of the frame. And it's kind of like that moment in Inception where, Leo's in the chair and they kick him backwards and he snaps out of the dream and he's back in the real world. Like to me, the case study is that thing for a tech business that's trying to figure it out so they can move on to scaling it up, because you can't help but go and like find the customer, listen to the customer, extract the nuggets from the customer and use that to make decisions when you do this. So it's like a very powerful forcing function that also takes you out of both the mindset and the talk track of here's what we built, here's how it works, here's exactly how it works. Isn't it cool? Do you want to buy some? Please, please, please. Which unfortunately is what the sales pitch sounds like for a lot of technology companies out there, especially enterprise technology companies, because this stuff is more complicated, more valuable with a lot more competition. The second thing is, like, paraphrasing what you said, this is a tool to help you find demand, not generate demand.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, I think it is very difficult and might be impossible to generate demand. So do you agree with that? And like either call bullshit on my hot take or like tell me a different angle on that hot take, because you say it several times in this deck and in your work that like you are not in control of a lot of this. And in some ways you are not in control of whether a customer has demand for your product or not. Is that true? What do I have wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. So I get in a lot of arguments over this particular thing.
Good.
And
we should talk about it.
I think people make a couple of mistakes when they think about demand. I don't believe there is such thing as demand for my product. I think demand is essentially supply agnostic. If I think of it as a project on your critical path, that project is never going to be talking about software. It's always going to be talking about like, I need to accomplish this thing in my life. And so demand is always supply agnostic. There's no such thing as demand for my product. And so if you think that demand is supply agnostic, what you then realize is, okay, basically how people decide what to do is they have a bunch of things that they could possibly focus on, and they do put something on their critical path. And then my product fits in as an option. I believe that I don't control what's on your Trello board. I don't think I might be able to influence it, or you have some high backlog project that you just haven't been able to do because for whatever reason, I say, hey, there's now a way to do that big high backlog project for you. I don't believe that I control your Trello board. I don't believe I create demand. I think that's, I think you might be able to influence it, but I think for our own sanity, just assuming that we have no control over demand leads us to just be better servants of customers versus like having a ton of ego and thinking that I can go out there and tell you what you should want. I just think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I like that. Okay. So let's say you're listening to this and you buy the idea of a case study, like not just a terrible marketing case study, but a case study that lays out like you had this problem, you had these options, these people chose us, this is where they got to. Do you want you some of that? That becomes your sales pitch. So what do you do once you feel like you've nailed this case study, and how does that help you get to the mythical land of product market fit?
Yeah, but it's so dumb what you do from that point. You put that case study on the slides one at a time, and then you have a lot of conversations with prospective customers.
Yeah.
And you walk through the case study one slide at a time and say, when we talk to people, they're usually trying to accomplish this kind of thing. How are you different? And they may say, yeah, we're totally different. We're not trying to accomplish that at all. Cool. That's interesting. Then you just figure it out from there. But like usually what you're trying to get to is, I want to get a case study onto slides that I use as a conversation, not a sales pitch. And when I show this to the right person and when I have the conversation with the right person, they buy. I'm not selling. They pull out. I'm not pushing. And so that's the whole thing. You just put it on the slide, have a have 10, 20 conversations a week and figure out who says hell yes to it and why. What are the objections people have who should be saying hell yes to it? And you kind of keep tweaking the case study until it like works 90% of the time for the person who should be a hell yes.
Yep. And so like, I don't invest in startups, right? I invest in founder-owned businesses, most of which have been around for a decade or two, started when the founders scratched their own itch. They've got some work that they need some help finishing, and founding the company is one way that I talk about it. So they have 100 or 200 customers that are pretty happy with them, but they know there's 300 to 500 others out there that should be working with them that either don't know who they are, or they don't understand what they do, or they're just not ready yet. So like, how do you change this approach when you're going from like a startup who's in search of the business model that's going to sustain them and help them grow? And now you're talking about a company that has existed for a while. It's stable, it's healthy, but they're trying to like inflect the growth rate and go from maybe growing single digits to double digits next year. Cause that's the world that I live in. I can immediately see how these concepts apply, and like, I've already stolen from them, spoiler, but I'm just curious, like, is the translation different? Are the dance moves different? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So it's like, it's actually much easier when you do have the intellectual exercise is easier when you have a bunch of customers.
Yep.
There's like a people process transformation thing, and how do we change how we do this thing, which is frankly why I don't work with later stage companies, because I don't have your
It's
patience.
wonderful and hard. And yes, I can see why. Yeah.
Basically what you do is you look at those 100 customers and ask yourself, which ones of these bought really fast and are really happy in comparison with the others?
Yep.
Okay, let's write the case study around them and try to understand the causal mechanics behind it. Assuming we don't control demand, assuming there was something in their world that caused them to like, I don't know, like be really happy and buy really fast, design around that, and then just go find more like that.
Yeah. You're kind of like deconstructing the ideal customer profile thing as you do that too, right? Because the typical approach to ideal customer profile, like the Silicon Valley playbook approach to ideal customer profile, is do exactly what you talked about. Like, do the analysis and figure out who bought fast, happy, lucrative, who stuck around and who expanded, make a list. But then it's, okay, now let's go to Zoom Info or Apollo and pull the NICE codes of all those people and look at their revenue and employee count and, tech stack, and find the other list, and then just go sick the BDRs on those people. But I think what you're saying is, go make the dot graph of the people on speed of purchase and like happiness of purchase, and find the outliers on the positive side, and then go like capture the hell out of the story of what was happening before you got there, what options they considered, why they went with you. And of course, the results that you helped them create. But the cool thing about this is it's a different and like more customer centric version of the ideal customer profile exercise, whose output is not a list. It's a couple case studies of customers that you want to clone and that you can actually use to go sell to other prospects, which there's something very cool about that.
Yeah. When I had this realization, I was like, wait a second. Is it actually like, does this actually work? Does this actually make sense? And then started trying it with a bunch of startups, and I was like, it is like the Gordian knot approach here, just radical simplification.
Okay. So I'm sure there's people listening to this, maybe a minority of you are saying, what the hell are these guys even talking about? But there are probably some people listening to this and getting excited because they've heard all these frameworks. They've heard all these terms. They have all the best practices in their head. They feel just as frustrated as you did about how those things conflict and the checklist approach to building a business. And this seems simpler and achievable. And there's some excitement because they can see how this would work. But if we stop the podcast right here, they would have no idea what to do next, aside from this vague notion of a case study. So let's say we're talking to that person and saying, okay, you buy Rob's approach, You like this simpler approach to product market fit. It's something you're either looking for in your startup or in your established emerging tech business. I'm going to go spend some time on this thing next week. What would you tell them to do?
Yeah. The simplest is create a 5-slide case study deck. Actually, 6 slides now that I look at it. 6-slide case study deck.
Yeah.
As I was saying. And start showing that to customers. So I'll start with like, what are the components of the case study? And they're things that we've already talked about. There's the demand side of the case study and the supply side of the case study. Every founder is going to want to start from the product and how cool it is and what pain points it saw and blah, 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 blah. Like, don't start there. We'll get there eventually. You'll earn the right to get there. But first, you start on the demand side. So basically, what's the project that was on this person's critical path, right? And that's something like, hey, we needed to automate QA to get it off of our plate and stop shipping bugs, right? That's like an example project.
Yep.
Context is the second thing, which is what's the causal story behind why this is on our critical path now versus like the million other things that could be on our critical path. And so for an example, same QA example, right? We just shipped a massive bug and the board is asking some very uncomfortable questions. Okay, cool. That's why this is on the critical path now.
Yep.
Then what are the options? In that situation where I need to accomplish that project, what are the different things I consider? I consider hiring. I consider outsourcing. I consider buying some software, right? And so those are like the general shapes of the options that I consider, and I make trade-offs across those different options.
And notice in that list, there are plenty of things on that list that are not buying software or technology. There's multiple ways to get that job done that have nothing to do with you or your competitors or an outside vendor coming in. And I think that's a super important point.
Yes. Yes. You are not competing necessarily against the other YC startup. They are not your competition.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is slide 4 on the demand side, which again, doesn't talk about your product at all. It talks about when that project is complete with the option that includes you, what does that world look like? Okay, so we could basically have that entire part of the conversation without ever showing a screen of our product, without even saying we have a product.
Correct.
And so you can have that conversation with customers, and like literally anybody can. UX people can, designers can, like founders can, who are afraid of sales, founders who love to sell, and but don't, so that is a really good first part of a sales deck to get into the weeds of when does somebody need to change and what options do they consider and what's the shape that change takes and what does success look like. Then, usually after the results slide, they're like, okay, the person on the other side is like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to accomplish. Those are the options I've considered. And yeah, it does seem like those options are good for other people, not me. This option seems like the one. Those results seem awesome. How does it work? And you're like, oh, you've earned the right to talk about your product. And so then you have 2 slides. How does it, we can say, how does it work? Which is not like, give me a training on the 40 different user
transistors and the resistors and the, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Often you don't even need to say that you use AI, like it's taken for granted. So how did you help them accomplish that project? Where did you fit to help them do that? And then what did they buy? What did they get? And how did they think about the value of that? You put that 6-part case study together on slides, and you have a conversation with customers, stopping on each slide. This is not a presentation. It is not a sales pitch. It is a conversation, each slide saying, how are you different?
Yeah.
And when you do that, you're going to hear one of 2 things. You're going to hear, oh my gosh, you've been listening in on our meetings. This is exactly it. Or you're going to hear some sort of a objection or question or somebody like vomiting on what you put. Both are useful. And so your job then is to have as many of these conversations as possible, review the call recordings, and try to debug what went wrong in those conversations to see, was this a problem with our case study? Were we just talking to the wrong person? And all of that feeds into making your case study better so that the right person at the right time sees it and says, holy hell, I must buy this right now. And they pull versus you pushing.
Yeah, I love that. And from a sales perspective, one of the things that I think is so effective about it is I spend a lot of time creating pitch decks for our portfolio companies and just trying to do what you've done on this page, which is get the product out of the center of the frame and talk about what is the issue or the challenge or the project or the problem. And there's two things going on in this approach that I think are very powerful. One is just like mathematically, there are 6 boxes on this page and 4 of them have nothing to do with us. It's how the customer got the job done. And then it's a double click only after you've earned the right to do the double click. Unlike, yeah, as an afterthought, we've built something that we think is pretty tailor made for some people who are doing similar work. And here's the necessary, curiosity satisfying points on how it works. The other thing is like it creates toeholds for discovery at each step of the process. Just like you said, you stop at each slide and you simply ask them, how are you different? And then you get curious. So I think the number one thing missing in the world of technology sales right now is curiosity. And you're kind of engineering forcing functions for curiosity into your sales process when you put things together like this, because it's not the terrible checklist of discovery questions. How many users, how many seats, what's your tech stack? It's like, hey, we're a really good fit for people who are going through stuff that looks like this, but we know you're different. And part of my goal on this call is to discover exactly how. So I've already started to use some of this and it works. I will say that it works.
I will say one other thing it does that is underappreciated. Most sales calls feel like I'm on this side of the table, you're on that side of the table, and I'm
100%.
pitching you. What this does is it brings us both onto the same side of the table. And I get to play the role of like saying, listen, I don't know if we're a good fit for you. Let me tell you about companies that are a good fit for working with us, what their situations are, and you just tell me how you're different, which totally takes the, at least for a founder who doesn't love sales, or for people who, like when you start pitching, they turn off and they don't give you clear feedback. Like it just generates a useful conversation where you're actually learning things versus in most cases, you're just pitching real hard and they feel it on the other side. And so they're not going to tell you the truth.
100%. There's something we call reactance that is just reacting to being in a sales conversation.
Yeah.
The way I talk about it is, let's say my laptop craps out today. I've got the blue screen of death and I know that I have to buy another laptop because I can't do my work without a laptop computer. And I ride my bike to the Apple store and I walk in the big glass doors and the person in the blue shirt comes up and greets me. And I know I have to buy a computer that day. And they say, what can I help you find? What do I say? I'm just looking around. So none of us want to be in a high pressure transactional situation where we feel like someone is pushing us faster than we want to go or towards something that we don't need. And this kind of like short circuits that reactance thing. It's like, hey, I have no control over whether you're going to buy or not. My only goal is to kind of illuminate someone else who 6 months ago went through exactly what you may or may not be going through right now, and to break that down in a way that helps you understand your options, helps you understand what's possible. And yeah, at the end, I'll brag a little bit about what it is that we built because I think it's pretty cool. That is a totally different conversation than most tech companies are having today. And there's a great quote, can't remember if it's Seth Godin or somebody else, but you differentiate through authenticity. You don't differentiate through features. And if you pitch this way, regardless of how your product is different from whoever else they're talking to, you're going to come away with a different, more positive impression than most commission carrying salespeople or even founders. And I think that's like a bit of a woo-woo point, but it's an important one. And especially when there's a lot of competitive products in your category, that can mean the difference between someone calling you back, someone buying it, someone recommending you. And there's something to that.
And I'll just add one more point there too, how this relates back to finding product market fit and the demand concept, right? Which is, if I assume I have no control over demand, that I can't convince you to have demand, I can't persuade you, then this is how I should just sell generally. And I should be focused on, like, when do people want to buy? I should design around the people who actually want to buy, the people who pull, the people who have real demand at this moment. And then it just takes all of the pressure out of all sales conversations, because it's like, I don't control this. My job is to articulate the case study in such a way that when you have demand, this resonates deeply with you, and supply, as you've said before, is aerodynamic so you can pull very easily.
Yeah.
And that's that. That's it. That's my job.
Love that. So we'll link to the deck in the show notes, and we'll make sure people know where to find you. But Rob, you do some great writing all about this topic. Like, I think you've found your niche, and I think the world needs what you've figured out. And after this explosion of interest on LinkedIn, I think you're feeling that and probably dealing with some capacity issues of your own. But let's say someone's interest is piqued by this conversation and they want to learn more about you and how you think and what you do. Where should they go to learn more?
Yeah, just go to my website, robsnyder.org. I am semi-overwhelmed with emails. So I would say there's a couple of ways I do work with startups to help them figure this kind of stuff out, set up their pitch, review their sales calls, stuff like that, to help them find the right case study. And yeah, so that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I actually have a day job of building my own B2B software startup. So if anybody needs SOC 2 compliance or cybersecurity stuff, like, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can help.
Awesome. Well, this is great. I mean, you've given me a lot of things that I've immediately used with my portfolio companies. Love reading your stuff. And it's been fun to get to know each other the last couple of months, because I think we think about the world in complementary ways. So thanks for coming on.
Hell yeah. And thank you for writing Hello Operator, which is honestly, no shit, it's the only newsletter I actually read every time it comes out. And there's literally only one. So keep up your good work too.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening. Ciao for now.